Meditators, today we're going to deep dive into finding opportunities in the crypto market. Sharing his knowledge with us today is Alex Svanevik. He is the founder and CEO of blockchain analytics platform Nansen.ai. I always love speaking to guests that share an entrepreneurial background. Makes for a really exciting episode, and we dive into some great concepts that you can all take away and use. The lessons Alex shares have been vital to his own success and led into Nansen's success as well. If you want to be vital to my success, remember to like and subscribe below. To stay one with the crypto markets, sign up and get 6 free Market Meditations newsletters a week. You'll find a link in the description below. Meditators, welcome to another episode of the Market Meditations podcast. Now, we have talked a lot about Nansen. So many of our guests that have come on have talked about Nansen, and today we have someone very special, a little bit involved in Nansen, to tell us all about it. Alex, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And before diving into Nansen, which our audience is very excited about, so many of our guests continually talk about, can you tell us a little bit about your story before Nansen and crypto?
Yeah. So I started working in crypto in 2017. Before that, I was working with AI and data science primarily. So my master's degree is in AI from the University of Edinburgh. I graduated in 2010. After graduating, I started my own company doing sort of consultancy around AI, trying to bring machine learning to the world of business. This was in 2010, so probably a bit too early for the sort of AI hype that we have today. But moved on to do management consulting to learn more about the business side of things, management in general. So did that for a couple of years. And then I moved into a European media group called 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐧, where I worked 4 years, first as a data scientist, then as a data science manager for a team in London, Oslo, and Barcelona. And 2017, I discovered Ethereum. And I remember having ignored Bitcoin for too long. And I thought, Bitcoin, I said all the classic things that people say about Bitcoin, like it's only used for like money laundering and, it's not stable, all that stuff. So I never really kind of got on to actually do anything with Bitcoin, even if I'd heard about it many years before. But Ethereum really, I really like the narrative, the story around Ethereum and how it could be this kind of, decentralized world computer. You can create applications that are, both permissionless, trustless, etc. So it didn't take very many months before I resigned from my job and actually decided to just go full-time crypto in late 2017. And the first thing I did was I joined a startup in Hong Kong where I was tasked with building up a data team, which I did. And I hired some great people for that team. The startup didn't work out, unfortunately, one of those ICO stories. With poor treasury management and basically the whole company getting laid off like from one day to the next. But yeah, at the end of the day, it was a blessing in disguise. So ended up co-founding Nansen together with one of the guys I'd hired and also another contact of mine, Lars, who's an excellent data engineer. And so, yeah, effectively from 2019, been working on Nansen.
It's crazy how much comes down to timing with these sorts of things. Some people like to call it luck, but it seems like you had 2 attempts, neither of those worked out. The third one happened to work out. So you can generate luck by not giving up and continually going forward and building. I'd love to know how your experience from AI consultancy and data analytics, what you learned from those businesses, as well as the failure in 2017 that helped you build Nansen.
Oh yeah, I learned a lot of things. So I think a few very concrete things I learned from this failed startup in Hong Kong. The main thing that's crypto specific is it's quite dangerous to issue a token before you have a very clear idea of what your product should be, because then you have to basically innovate in 2 dimensions at the same time. And that's been one of the key, I think, quite strategic decisions we've made with Nansen, where we've said, hey, let's just adopt a relatively simple business model, a software as a service business model, and then focus 100% on building a really good product. So that's definitely a key learning that I took away from that specific experience. Management consulting is kind of like very good preparation in general to work with business and like problem solving, understanding organizations, also understanding how organizations dysfunction, like how they fail and so on. And
How
so
do they dysfunction?
so basically, many organizations, you kind of expect that they work well because they're large brands, they're large companies. And when you're on the inside, you see, hey, this stuff they're doing, they're basically doing the same thing as they were doing in the 1960s or something, right? When it comes to an insurance company that does like risk scoring of customers, and they haven't even looked at, say, machine learning based models. They're still using like generalized linear models or something that people were using in the 50s or 60s, and there's all this innovation and they haven't tapped into it. That to me is like dysfunctional of an organization, if it could be using models that would give them better results, right? But also with regards to how incentives work in a large organization. Very often organizations are designed in such a way that your incentives are really for your turf, right? You want like increased headcount for your division, but you don't think holistically about what's best for the company. And that creates really screwed up behavior, actually. Not because people are evil, just because the incentives are wrong. So that kind of stuff, you actually learn a lot, I think, through management consulting by seeing lots of different organizations and sort of getting tasked to solve specific problems. And then the AI component, of course, that's more the sort of technical chops and skills that obviously I brought with me to Nansen. I don't do that much kind of hands-on work right now. I did actually a lot last year, and I helped build, most of the data platform we have, and even the first version of the front end. But now, of course, understanding what are the areas where using AI techniques makes sense, and like where can we do something that is actually just a lot simpler. That's one, I think, skill that is useful, having worked with AI for many years. And the other part is probably all the infrastructural work. And so not rushing ahead and trying to do fancy things before you've laid the groundwork of having a really good data platform.
I think that it's a really key insight you learn as a small company working with big companies, that you just build them up as this fantasy that they're perfect and they run really smoothly, and it's not a bunch of people running an organization, but rather it's this smooth machine. And then you dive in and you realize, wait, these are just people. There's opportunity everywhere. That's one of the biggest things I can take away from it, is that there's just so much opportunity because there's so much inefficiency. And that's where an entrepreneur makes money, finding inefficiency or a new segment of the market. So obviously hugely beneficial for you, and something I hope listeners can take away, that there's inefficiency everywhere, every single market, with loads of problems, that if you just find one and focus on it, you probably can do a better job than these huge perfect organizations, because no amount of money or funding can solve those sorts of issues unless there's deliberate attention put towards them.
Yeah.
100%. So Alex, for those who don't know, what is Nansen?
Nansen is an analytics platform for the blockchain industry. And what we do is we help crypto investors make better decisions, in brief. The way we do it is we help them discover new opportunities on our platform. We help them perform due diligence on those opportunities, and also to defend their portfolios by receiving alerts if certain events take place on the blockchain. So the way I would think of Nansen is it's actually a totally new paradigm when it comes to the type of financial information you can get, because blockchains are fundamentally different than the traditional financial infrastructure. And so blockchains enable a form of transparency, which is unique. You can really see every single transaction that takes place on a public blockchain like Ethereum. But at the same time, the challenge is that you don't know much about these different entities. You see, A sending funds to B, but who is A and who's B? Maybe not the specific entity, but which category would you place A or B into? And so the key value add we do on the data side with Nansen is we tag up all these different accounts. And so we have more than 90 million addresses tagged up in our database, and we can enrich all the public on-chain data. In addition to, of course, parsing out information that's already in the on-chain data, which can be useful. And that just enables a lot of analytical questions to be answered that you could not answer if you didn't have those wallet labels on top of the on-chain data. So that's fundamentally what we do. We try to make the crypto industry grow by having the pioneers who have entered the crypto space emerge as winners because they've gotten access to high quality analytics through our platform.
Such a perfect business, so necessary for the market right now. I'd like to dive into exactly how the average person can use it and what benefits they can get. But before that, just a little bit more on the great job you guys are doing building the platform, because you're not the only people trying to provide this sort of information, but one of the most successful so far. You've previously tweeted that talent is one of the most scarce resources in crypto. I'd love to know about how you guys combat that problem and what your hiring process looks like.
Yeah, I love that question. So I think as you see more and more capital flowing into crypto, that sort of trickles down, and you see different companies raising rounds, sometimes at quite high valuations. And I think at the end of the day, where it kind of stops is, well, humans are a pretty scarce resource, at least talent is. And I don't mean to say that, there isn't a lot of talent in the world, but when you think about it, there's actually not that many people working in the crypto space today. And so the key challenge that you have as someone trying to build an organization is to actually attract talent and retain them, of course. And so I think there are three main sources for us to hire. The obvious one is to hire people who already work in crypto, and so like poaching people from other companies. But that doesn't really grow the pie. It's also a pretty small pool of people. The second one is where you try to get people who are crypto curious, right? They might have done some like hobby investing, but they have a job in a bank, they work in a large tech company, retail company, really whatever. And they're thinking, hey, maybe this is the time to join a crypto company. And that's like the more interesting pool for us. And most of the candidates we receive in our inbox are actually in that category. There's also a third category of people who aren't in crypto and are also not that crypto curious, but you could perhaps convince them to come in. And so that's a bit more of a harder sell, and we tend to focus on category 2. And I would say, in terms of a hiring process, it's pretty simple. First of all, you can go to docs.nansen.ai, and we have a little section there on open positions, but you can also just email careers@nansen.ai if you want to inquire about what roles exist. We're a bit behind actually on publishing job descriptions, and we want to hire, let's say, between 20 and 30 people just this year. So there's certainly a lot of opportunities there if people want to start working in crypto. But yeah, the challenge for us as founders, I think at some point, many of these companies who've raised a lot of money will realize, hey, maybe that was the big battle, like to try to get the best talent to join your company. I don't talk about it that much because I don't want to leak that alpha too much to other companies, but there is a bit of a zero-sum element there in just trying to get people. Hopefully we can get more people into crypto to grow the pie. And I really don't want to get into sort of battles of trying to poach, from other companies.
I mean, that just won't be sustainable for the industry as a whole if every company's just fighting over the same pie. But I'm not surprised that you guys are hiring 20 to 30 new people this year, because you recently did a 12 million raise. Congratulations. That's huge. So what made you guys go for a raise? Because I know the platform is successful and profitable as it is. And so what informed the decision to go for a raise rather than just continue as you were?
Yeah, I would say the main thing that made us raise money in the first place was that we could make a larger commitment to our employees. So if we wanted to convince someone to come along with us on this journey, we could actually be confident and say, hey, for the next 2 years, as long as you're doing a good job, you're going to have a job with us here at Nansen. You don't run into any risk of, say, being laid off because we can't pay you a salary. Maybe that was influenced by my own experience of being laid off back in 2018 at the bottom of the market. But that's definitely one of the main reasons. But I think the other part, which perhaps is more sort of forward-looking and more optimistic, is that you can raise the level of ambition if you have more capital. And so that means you can suddenly start planning more long-term. You can start spinning up teams that are sort of dedicated to a specific initiative, and you have the resources to back that up. And if you think in terms of the cost structure for a company like Nansen, the bulk of our costs are, headcount, so salaries, right? It's practically, it's brains and computers, right? And so we have this, by having these funds, we can scale up our headcount so that we can actually do things that are not possible if we're only, say, 5 or 10 people. But in addition, we can also invest a lot in our data infrastructure, which is actually a pretty large cost as well when you think about the massive volumes we have to ingest at scale and have like real latency and things like that. But those are the two main cost drivers, brains and computers. And so, we're not going out there to, buy anything very, very big. And like, if you think about the current climate now, acquisitions aren't really an option for us with this amount of capital, given that there's a lot of capital flowing into seed rounds, Series A rounds, and also many of the biggest companies in the space are raising, Series D, E, F rounds, who will probably use some of those funds to make acquisitions themselves, right?
Seems like very important reasoning. The primary one I took away from it was it allows you to make long-term decisions and not prioritize short-term cash flow now that you have the funding, which hugely beneficial in a space like crypto where we expect it to parabolically go up in the long term. At least most of us who are here do.
Yeah. Also, crypto is kind of unique. If you're building in the crypto market, you have to almost expect that some of your revenues will be cyclic, some of your growth will be cyclic, and that's something that many VCs aren't actually used to. So you have to make sure you have the right long-term thinking investors on board. We're fortunate because we've seen growth the whole time, but we've also been around for like 1.5 years, so it's a pretty short amount of time. But if you're totally bootstrapped and there's suddenly a bear market, you can actually risk going out of business if you don't have the cash reserves at hand. So it is also partially, a defensive move as well to raise money.
Do you think the solution is cash reserves? Is there anything else companies in the space can do to prepare themselves for the cyclical nature, specifically the harder parts of that cycle?
Certainly, you can try to think about diversifying your revenue sources and your client base. Well, there's really two things you can do. You can diversify your product offering, or you can diversify your client base. And so finding customer segments that are going to be around even in a bear market, or who knows, who will even buy more in a bear market, right? That depends on what industry or what problem you're solving. That's something you could do. And it's something we've thought a lot about. The product offerings as well, like what are some things that people will buy in a bear market and how are they different from what people will buy in a bull market. So if I didn't have, a lot of cash reserves or a lot of dollars on the bank account as a company, I'd probably want to think very carefully about those two dimensions and how to diversify them more.
Fantastic advice. So Alex, let's move on to how to use Nansen, how our listeners can get involved and start benefiting from the platform. Let's start with, why would I choose Nansen over other companies in the space?
So I think Nansen is unique because we have the best wallet label coverage. There's not really any other product that has the amount of coverage we have on the broader Ethereum ecosystem. So I want to be clear as well up front that we don't focus on Bitcoin, for example. This is a platform that you would use if you're interested in DeFi, NFTs, tokens, Ether and so on, and possibly also like side chains and layer 2 solutions connected to the Ethereum ecosystem. But that's what you look at in Nansen. And so why should people choose Nansen? There's really, first of all, there's not really like any platform that does exactly the same thing. Either you get much poorer wallet label coverage, or you have to look at things from a much more macro perspective. So there are platforms out there which will show very high level metrics, but they don't really feel actionable. And so the stuff you can do in Nansen is you can kind of go from that macro level and see, hey, there's a lot of inflow in this smart contract, or there's a lot of money flowing into this token, and you can drill down all the way to the individual wallets and transactions, and suddenly the narratives start appearing in front of you. It's like, hey, this is an investor, they're buying ABC token, and I want to figure out why. And so it has this kind of like microscope aspect to it, where you can find these narratives and you can go out and perhaps share it with other people and discuss it. And suddenly you found out that, hey, there's actually this fund investing in this token and they haven't announced it yet. So you can sort of grab these kinds of opportunities in many cases from our dashboards. And it's kind of hard to give sort of one specific use case for Nansen, because it is almost like fractal. There's like literally millions of different views that you could take if you just plug in the different parameters, right? So if you look at this wallet, there's a chance that no one has ever looked at that wallet with that specific lens. And that gives you information that you can act on, and perhaps you can be ahead of the rest of the market, right? But in terms of how to use it, it goes back to the things I mentioned earlier. You would use it for, number one, to discover opportunities. And so we actually categorize our dashboards that way. So you can see Discover up in the tab, and there's a bunch of dashboards where you don't need to have any input. You just click them and you will see what's happening with Ether, what's happening with stable coins, what are the hot contracts where there's capital flowing into, what's the smart money doing, because we also aggregate like smart money as a specific category. And then from there, you can start doing your due diligence. So you discover a new token, you discover a smart contract. Maybe the next step is to do some due diligence on who has been putting capital into this smart contract. And so you can click through to another dashboard, top depositors, and it will show you, some fund or some specific sort of influencer account has put in, $2 million into this project, and a few other people have done the same. That will give me information with regards to the risk reward profile of this opportunity. Of course, none of this stuff is investment advice, but you can use this information to make up your own mind, right? If this is worth putting capital into, or on the flip side, if you don't see any smart money addresses, if you don't see any sort of notable addresses putting money into this, and maybe it's even very few, you might want to go back and do more due diligence and research this project a bit more. But that's the typical workflow, kind of going between discovery and due diligence. And then the third thing, which many people actually discover kind of later in their Nansen journey, is to use smart alerts. And so this means you can set up alerts based on the stuff you learn in the platform. For example, hey, this address here tends to be really early in different yield farming opportunities. I want to be alerted every time they do something. Now you can set that up. It takes 20 seconds, and you can get notifications real time on Telegram, Discord, and Slack. And there's also lots of different logics that you can create here. So you could say, I want to get notified every time anyone transacts an ABC token transaction worth more than $10 million, and you get notifications for it. So you can really create this holistic platform where you're kind of like, you have this companion with you as you make investments in the crypto space.
Okay, well, that answers like the next 3 questions I had planned about how to use it, how the platform can benefit a new user, where to go, and how specifically to use it for yield farming, so you can track like people who are good at great yield farming and see exactly what farms they like to go in and where the money moves about, follow them if you want to, as well as literally your imagination seems to be the limit on how you can use these insights in this platform.
Yeah, and one thing I used to do, because I want to be clear that I also am a power user myself of Nansen, right? I use it a lot, and for a long time, I was literally the #1 user in terms of, page views and stuff like that, because I was just a heavy user of it. Now there are some people who've actually managed to go past me, but and that's a good thing, I think. But one thing I would do is like I would look at token God mode, which is our most popular dashboard, and I would plug in like a stable coin, say DAI or USDC, and just from seeing like which addresses have received the most USDC inflow, you can often discover new yield farms that way. And so that's pretty cool. It just kind of gives you a way to go into the platform. You don't need to have like a social network of a ton of sort of inner circle people. You can just look at the data and what people are actually doing, and then learn about these opportunities through there. So yeah, I mean, without sounding like a salesperson, I mean, I think it's worth going to our website at Nansen.ai and doing a trial. It's $9, so worst case you will have lost $9, but I think most people will find that there's some useful things you can extract from the platform.
No, 100%, and there'll be links in the description below for anyone looking as well. So there's one thing you didn't touch on that I had prepared and wanted to ask, thankfully. So I have more questions. Last month you released NFT dashboards on Nansen. Yeah. So what can these be used for, and how can investors generate actionable insights from NFT dashboards?
Yeah, many of the concepts are similar, but let's try to think about them in terms of NFT specifically. So we have an NFT dashboard called NFT Paradise, and it tracks certain metrics across different NFT collections. For example, what's the total traded volume in the last 24 hours? How many addresses hold these different NFTs? What's the floor price or the minimum price of an NFT in that collection, and what's the max price and the average price, etc. So that gives you that discovery framework, right? Like if you're just opening up that page, right away you see, hey, Sup Ducks or Bored Apes or whatever it is at the top of the list or in the top 3. You never heard about it, and you can also see, hey, this contract was deployed like 22 hours ago. And so that's the discovery element. Then you can literally just click on that row and you get to the NFT God mode, which shows you things like, who are the people buying these NFTs? Is it well-known sort of influencer wallets that have been hoarding them? Is it more distributed? What's the breakdown of people buying these different NFTs? And you can also see, to what extent they're holding on to the NFTs, or are they just flipping them? You can even see like visually the price evolution of each individual NFT sold in that collection, and you can see how the floor price often like goes up over time. I don't know if I should explain some of these concepts like floor price and so on, but because we are very much in a crypto world here.
Well, our audience is pretty crypto based, and I'm sure they can dive in further to find out more about that should they need to, because we've got 2 more topics we want to cover in the time we have.
Let's do it.
One which I'm fascinated by and definitely don't want us to miss out on is you and your thoughts on the future of the space, because building Nansen has probably given you a very unique lens on the space that a lot of other people don't have. Not only have you been building it, but been, as you said, one of the most active users. How has Nansen, both building and using it, changed your view on crypto as a whole?
I think the main takeaway, and I'm not sure this is Nansen itself that sort of taught me this lesson, but it's definitely been strengthened by it. I think when you're not in crypto, you tend to think that markets are efficient. You tend to think you can't outperform the market. And this is probably true for most retail investors when it comes to things like equities trading. But when you start dabbling with crypto, you suddenly realize, hey, there are a lot of opportunities. There's basically opportunities everywhere. And one of the first things I actually did in crypto was to discover that there was a massive arbitrage opportunity on 2 different major exchanges actually in 2017. And it just seemed absurd to me that this would happen, right? Like, why would there be arbitrage opportunities in an industry that trades like billions of dollars a day? It just seems absurd. But then I actually made the trade and actually profited from these arbitrage trades myself. And that was probably when I kind of learned this lesson that actually in crypto, there are opportunities everywhere. It's just about trying to find them. And so with Nansen, it's the same thing. Like you can actually have information at hand that really gives you an edge, and you can actually, profit from that. And so, we will also want to have be very clear that there's obviously no guarantee that if you buy a Nansen subscription, you will make money, right? That's not how it works. But there's plenty of examples of people who have used Nansen to discover stuff before the masses and have made trades on it. And I think actually the investor that led our seed round, Mechanism Capital, Andrew Kang, they also participated in the Series A round, and he claims that the whole investment that they made in Nansen as a company comes from profits that they generated from using Nansen. And so I think that kind of tells you that this information is actually extremely valuable if you know how to use it, and if you, of course, have the capital to generate returns on it, which is important. Like I wouldn't recommend someone who has $1,000 in crypto to go and spend $150 a month on our subscription. It just doesn't make sense, like the economics of it. But if you have, say, $100,000 upwards, certainly it's worth considering. I mean, basically that's how I think about our core customer segment. Basically anyone who has $100,000 of crypto and they're relatively active investing. They don't have to be day traders, but they invest in different tokens, etc. Upwards to the largest VC funds, market makers, and so on. That's really the core user segment that we focus on.
I really, really have a lot of respect for you for clarifying that. So many subscription-based products take 10% plus of people's portfolios and say that this is a smart investment for them, bots, signal services, all sorts of things. So absolutely love that you clarified that, and think the audience will really appreciate that level of transparency and honesty from the company. Alex, what areas of the market are you keeping an eye on right now for future growth? What do you think the rest of the market is overlooking?
I think a lot of people certainly are overlooking NFTs, or they're ridiculing it, which is understandable. But I think many people haven't realized that NFTs are to some extent disconnected from large parts of the rest of the crypto market. There are people who are into NFTs that really don't care about anything else in crypto. They have no interest in DeFi. They have no interest in flipping tokens on Uniswap, buying Bitcoin for the long term. They just want to do NFTs. And so I think that part is, I wouldn't say it's overlooked, because obviously there's a lot of traction in that area, but many crypto people might not realize that it's actually a real thing, and it's here to stay, and it's probably going to grow to become really, really big. That's one thing. And then I think I tend to say that DeFi is the thing I'm the most bullish on in the long term. I think most people are aware of DeFi, so I don't have to sort of make that pitch. But if you just think about how big the total addressable market is for DeFi, I mean, that's just a huge opportunity. And maybe the last thing I'll say is I think one of the main challenges now for crypto investors is that it's about getting into the early stage deals and projects. And so you have to probably be even more active now, hunting down the good deals, because we are kind of in a crab market, or some people would say maybe even a bear market. Not sure I would say that, but it forces you to be do more due diligence and be more active. And so when you look at investors like 𝐏𝐸𝐧 raising literally billions of dollars, that money is going to get deployed. So it's not like 𝐏𝐸𝐧 is going to buy stable coins with those billions, right? They're going to go out and deploy it. So it seems obvious that there's going to be sectors in crypto that are going to experience a lot of growth. I don't necessarily think that 𝐏𝐸𝐧 is going to go out and buy Bitcoin with it either, right? So you have to think, what kind of investments are they going to be making, as well as other funds. And I think a lot of it is going to be these early stage projects, and you have to figure out how can you get involved with those types of projects at an early stage.
So you think there's a lot of opportunity in early stage projects right now if you can find the right ones?
And if you have access to the deal flow, because that's tricky. I mean, just speaking openly, there are many funds that discover these opportunities, but they can't get into, the seed round or pre-seed or whatnot. So I think maybe there's room for some better solutions in that area, and maybe we'll play a part in that, but remains to be seen.
I mean, I find the best way to get access to that sort of deal flow is putting yourself in a position where you can be a key value add to that project.
100%. Yeah, that's how you do it.
Find yourself some sort of edge which you don't think the rest of the market has, some sort of unique skill set, and then add that to networking and finding the deal flow, and you can potentially get access to that side of the market as well.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you, because I think that's an excellent point. And I think the same thing is happening on chain, because people have their own addresses and you can see their whole transactional history. And there's plenty of examples of, as we know, airdrops that have been made from Uniswap, 1inch, etc., to addresses, which means your address is now an asset, right? Your history has made it an asset. But there are also examples of yield farms and investment opportunities that were only available to whitelisted addresses because they were governance participants, for example. And so I think the exact same principle that you just laid out in terms of value add and being sort of a good citizen can be translated to your on-chain history. And if you want to choose to be public about your own address and so on, you can do that. But you can still do this thing pseudonymously with the private identity. But the persistence of that identity is the key thing, and making sure that you keep using that address and you build up a transactional history where you show that you are a value add to a new project, for example.
That's a great idea. You could didn't think of it like that, where you can actually use your on-chain identity. I mean, even the concept of an on-chain identity is crazy, but I suspect will be normalized over the next 5 years. The NFT people love to say it, people will show each other their NFT wallets and on-chain addresses. It'll be a means of showing your identity, your status. We'd love to see how this develops over the next few years.
And as you said, that is very tightly linked to trends like NFTs, which are very status-oriented and identity-oriented. So yeah, I think that's a huge area.
Incredible. Alex, this has been a terrific podcast. Thank you so much for your time. We've dived all over the place into some really interesting areas, loads of alpha leaked, which I'm sure the audience will absolutely appreciate. As we draw this episode to a close, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think just go and check out Nansen.ai. That's the best thing I can say. And you can follow us on Twitter, Nansen_AI, or myself at 𝐏𝐨𝐬𝐬𝐵. That's where I do most of my shit posting and occasionally a bit of data as well.
Meditators, that's all from us. Thank you so much. See you next time.
I really enjoyed this episode. Alex was hugely transparent in the benefits, but also the downsides of a platform like Nansen. He offered great insights that anyone can use to navigate the platform and aid their trading and investing. There are new opportunities every day in crypto. However, it can be difficult to know where to find them, and that is exactly why I have my research team write 6 free market meditations newsletters a week. We share the latest news so you can keep up to date with the market. To access all this, all you have to do is go and subscribe at 𝐏𝐨𝐴𝐾.substack.com. If you enjoyed this episode, check out my conversation with Crypto Messiah, the guest that first recommended we look into Nansen.